The Name of the Rose and the Decameron give us two very different perspectives on the Middle Ages. And these are both perspectives that for Italians are alive, they are real, they are still with them every day of their lives. And you may wonder, how can that be, since these events happened about 7 or more centuries ago? But that's because the places where Italians, the towns, the cities, and even the countryside, is a constant reminder of those days and those times. If you go down the streets of any downtown in even a small town in Italy, you will find constantly reminders of different historical eras that are in front of your eyes, and they mesh with each other seamlessly. On the corner there is a little church that maybe was built in the 1100s. You turn the corner and there is a building that was the um, the house, the mansion of the most important family, the ruler of that town or that area, in for 300-400 years. Stones, very massive, with bars at the windows. They were mini castles for defense purposes. And then you wander through the narrow and winding streets of, again, hundreds of towns. And you are in an environment that was created 7, 8, 10, 15 centuries ago. Not all the buildings go back to that time, and they've been replaced in several successions by different styles, so that you can find yourself enmeshed in this sort of puzzle quilt, crazy quilt of structures. And they are reminders of the various eras. You live with them. You come to a little square, and again, in front of you, you have a church. On the opposite side, you have Palazzo del Governo, so called, or City Hall, where now City Hall is located and where the civic power once stood. So to talk about mentality and to talk about culture is not an abstract concept. The reminders are everywhere around us. They are in the names of towns, they are in the names of streets, they are in the names of neighborhoods, very often associated or named after saints, patron saints of the town, or the local spiritual hero who, for instance, became a saint, who's still venerated today. Practically every town is drenched in legends of apparitions of the Madonna on a tree, by a rock, in a grotto, that saved the town from the plague, from one of the many plagues. So all of these elements, consciously or not, are very much part of the fabric of our existence, and they penetrate and they are with us from birth. And to us, thinking back about, to Italians, thinking back about 7, 10 centuries ago, in some areas, particularly Greco-Roman ruins, again, it's a perfectly normal thing. It's integrating those realities into our daily lives. So the two aspects, the Name of the Rose and the Decameron, to us, although seemingly contradictory, are very much part of how we think about certain aspects, certain philosophical aspects of our existence. So we laugh and we find it extremely humorous about Andreuccio da Perugia, who falls into blah blah blah. We do not see anything scandalous or reprehensive about ladies betraying their husbands, husbands betraying their ladies, about priests having trysts or tricking credulous people into some kind of a trick. We have no objections to pranks and practical jokes, making fun of the idiot of the village, or making fun of the pretentious. This is very much what comes up in the Decameron, Pasolini's Decameron. But it's also true that present in our subconscious, in our mentality, is the world represented by the name of the rose. Fear and at the same time suspicion for power. The consciousness that particularly when the power of the church is associated with the power of the state, you really do not have much of an escape. And for many people, it is much easier, or it is bred inside themselves, to believe in the essential goodness of that power, in the fact that the power is divinely ordained in a way or another, and that it's only the failure of men. Normally it's men, not women. It's the failure of men that transforms the Christian message into a message of intolerance and cruelty, such as we have seen represented in The Name of the Rose, or we discussed in another video about the presence of evil and the determination of the church to extirpate evil from the world, even with the most heinous and cruel systems. So both elements live together in the psyche of Italians, and it is a constant switch and a pendulum inside the very person, inside the very mind of every individual, to take one position or another, to judge things according to criteria that we have absorbed almost certainly subconsciously. Even those who do not have a Christian education, who do not grow up in a Christian house, the few people who belong to religious minorities, the very few Italian Jews, approximately 30,000 in a country of 60 million, or the very few Protestants of the Waldensian denomination, which even preceded Martin Luther, and they are mostly located in the northern part on the border between France and Italy, where, not coincidentally, Umberto Eco locates The Name of the Rose. It was a border in the Alps where this kind of heresies were traveling. Plus, there are other small Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox communities. Now, with the influx of immigrants, we also have a large presence of Islamic people, of Muslims. But up until the 1990s, the reality was culturally Italy is fundamentally a Christian, not just Christian, but Catholic country. People may have rejected religion, may not believe in God and all of the dictatums and the dogma of Christianity. But again, from a cultural standpoint, the points of references are very much there. Fear of power, suspicion of power, derision of power, acceptance that power altogether is invested with a fundamental function of establishing and maintaining order in society. Italians are a very weird breed of anarchists in the sense they accept the notion of power, but they take pride in defying power, but not necessarily in a courageous and in a warrior kind of way. They find ways to go around power, to sneak around it, to try to take advantage of it, recognizing the fact that altogether the structure is immutable, the way the church and power associated, and the civil power associated, have been basically immutable in Italy for over 2,000 years. Recorded a couple of hours later, but I wanted to get this in. Not my favorite individual in Italian history, but Italians are also being observed and evaluated from the perspective of those people who are in power. Benito Mussolini, the head of the fascist regime, once famously said, "It's not that it is impossible to govern Italians. It is useless." Now, I could go on forever, and I am not trying to convince anybody of the reality and the truth of this essence, but if we were to dig deep, deep down, even into the people who are formally against this structure, altogether they have to recognize that this is what constitutes the collective existence of the Italian people, for bad and for good, of course.